So we are going to go underneath a lot of bridges today. The first bridge we come to is the Lakeshore Drive Bridge. There used to be a guy that lived underneath it. Oh yeah. Back in 2004, Richard Dorsey figured out a way to crawl up into the inner steel framework inside of those walls, so he's hidden away from everybody, tapped into the city's electrical supply that runs to the bridge houses. So underneath that bridge, he had himself a television, a microwave, and a Sony PlayStation, all the comforts of home. What happened was one of his friends is a horrible person and tried to rob a convenience store. Rather than get thrown in jail for armed robbery, he told on Richard Dorsey, and now there's no more people underneath that bridge. It's pretty much the end of that story. I do not have a segue for that one. So the first two buildings I'd like to show you today are going to be up ahead of us and off to the left. Up ahead, to the left, you will start to see a tall building with shiny blue windows, and its most striking feature is the white, undulating, curvy balconies coming off of each floor. That would be the fairly new Aqua 2009, designed by Jeannie Gang. Aqua is 81 stories tall, has the largest outdoor pool and sun deck in Chicago. Each of those white, curvy balconies is put on there with the help of GPS, because they're all uniquely shaped from one another. They wanted to make sure they got the desired visual effect they're going for. For me, it's like a cascading waterfall. We'll see the Aqua on the way back. I'll tell you more about it then. To the left and behind the Aqua is a tall whites building with dark vertical stripes all the way up and down. That would be the 83-story Aon Center, built in 1973 by Edward Durrell Stone. Aon is Chicago's third tallest building at 1,136 feet. Originally, Aon was the world's tallest marble-clad building. It no longer holds that title because it's no longer covered in marble. They discovered after its completion that the beautiful white Carrara marble they originally faced that building with was buckling and cracking because of Chicago's harsh winters. So they wrapped the building up so nothing would fall off and conk somebody in the head on the sidewalk, took all 43,000 panels of marble off, and then replaced it with granite from North Carolina. That whole process cost them $80 million, which is almost as much as it cost to complete the building in the first place. Now you might be thinking, geez, Sarah, didn't the architects and engineers foresee that being a problem? Oh yeah. Originally, the Aon Center was the Standard Oil building. The president of the company, his wife, she's the one that wanted the marble. They all said, lady, you're crazy. It's not going to work in Chicago. Marble expands when it's hot. It contracts when it's cold. It's not a good idea. She said, no, I want the marble. $80 million mistake and a big old whoops on that one. So here on the right, on the riverbank, we have the bare bones of what is normally a very gorgeous fountain. Sorry, folks, it really just hasn't gotten warm enough yet for them to turn the water back on. If that water sits in those pipes overnight and freezes up, it'll expand and just destroy everything. So that's why the water's still off. But that's called Centennial Fountain, because it was built in 1989 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Chicago Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. That's a lot of fancy words put together to mean the people that reverse the flow of the Chicago River. Some of you might know this already, but the river flows backwards. It used to flow east into Lake Michigan. Now it flows west away from the lake. We had to go through all that trouble because in Chicago's early history, we had no sewers. Thought of this river as nothing more than a garbage dump. Human waste, industrial waste, animal carcasses, anything we didn't want, we dumped it in. And it carried out into Lake Michigan. Huge problem. Lake Michigan was, and still is, our source of drinking water. Thousands of people were dying from typhoid and cholera. So a group of guys got together and decided the best way to fix that would be to divert the flow of the river away from the lake. They dug a 28-mile-long canal on the South Branch called the Chicago Sanitary and Shipping Canal. By excavating all of that dirt, they lowered the riverbed. And just to give you a sense of scale on that, they excavated more dirt during the Sanitary and Shipping Canal than they did the Panama Canal. That gives you a sense of the scope. So by excavating all that dirt, lowered the riverbed, water wants to run on gravity, so essentially it sucked the river backwards, and now we send everything to St. Louis. Sorry, Cardinals fans. Not really. So immediately after this bridge on the right, you'll see a building that looks older than it is. This is the NBC Tower, Chicago. Built in 1989, designed by Adrian Smith of Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. It is meant to look like Rockefeller Center in New York City, NBC's headquarters there. So it's very much in the style of a 1920s Art Deco skyscraper. Soaring vertical lines, setbacks to accentuate that verticality in a strong geometric shape. So if you keep looking right in the distance, far away, you have to work for this one because it's way down north on Michigan Avenue, start to see a tall black building, two giant white antenna on top. That's a John Hancock building. Built in 1969, designed by Bruce Graham of Skidmore, Owens, and Merrill. Hancock is Chicago's 4th tallest. Broadcast antenna do not count in the final height of a building, so it's the 4th tallest at 1,127 feet. So Hancock has 100 stories. They have an observation deck on the 94th. You can spend your money and go up there and look at stuff if you like, or they have a bar and restaurant on the 95th and 96th floors called the Signature Room. For about the price of that observation deck ticket, you can go up to the Signature Room, get yourselves a drink, see all the same stuff, and not be thirsty. However you want to do it, those are fine by me. On the way back, I will tell you what they did add to the observation deck last year to make it a little bit more enticing to you. In the meantime, however, this building on the right that says Fidelity Investments on the bottom corner, that sits on the site of where Jean-Baptiste du Sable had his fur trading post in 1779. Du Sable was Chicago's first permanent non-Native American resident. He was French and Haitian, oftentimes called the father or the founder of Chicago. So the open area next door is called Pioneer Court in Du Sable's honor, and then rising above Pioneer Court, the gorgeous Gothic Tribune Tower. Tribune Tower was built in 1925 as the result of an international design competition held by the Tribune in 1922. To celebrate their 75th anniversary, they wanted to build the most beautiful office building in the world. That winning design was picked from 263 entries they received. Hood and Howells were the winning architects. We'll see the Tribune on the way back. I'll tell you more about it then. Meantime, after this bridge on the right, you get to see the beautiful Wrigley Building, designed by Charles Biersman of Graham, Anderson, Probst, and White. The South Tower, the one closest to us with the clock at the top, was built in 1921. North Tower completed in 1924. There are 6 different shades of white terracotta tiles on the face of the Wrigley Building that get lighter and brighter as they go up to draw your eyes up to the top of the clock tower at 398 feet. There's 250,000 individual terracotta tiles on the Wrigley Building, which they hand wash. If you try to power wash that terracotta, it would disintegrate, so they lovingly hand wash it. And that's going to bring us into one of the newest and biggest installations in the Chicago skyline. This giant blue building is the Trump International Hotel and Tower. This is a 2009 Adrian Smith design. Adrian Smith did not want this building to dominate everything in the vicinity, so he designed it with a series of setbacks to give it some visual continuity with the more notable buildings around it. First setback is about the height of the base of the Wrigley Building back behind us. Second setback on the opposite side is about the height of the rounded Marina City Towers, which we'll see better and talk about more in a minute. And then that third setback is about the height of the former IBM building, which is the black glass and steel building coming up next door to Trump on the right. To give you an idea of the difference between those two, former IBM building is 52 stories tall, whereas Trump is topped off at 96 stories. It gives Trump Tower a full height of 1,389 feet, making it Chicago's 2nd tallest building. As I was saying, next door to Trump is a former IBM building. I keep using the word former because the IBM Corporation originally occupied it. They moved out in 2006, but don't let the simple design of that black building fool you. It is very important architecturally speaking because in 1971 was the last American building designed by a famous German architect named Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Mies van der Rohe was head of the Bauhaus over in Germany. He had to flee here to the United States. When he got here, he became head of the Illinois Institute of Technology. Basically, Mies van der Rohe was the father of modern architecture. So we'll be spending a little bit of time talking about his personal design aesthetic later on. In the meantime, though, one of Mies's students from the Bauhaus, Bertrand Goldberg, who had a completely different design aesthetic, Goldberg created the 2 towers of Marina City coming up next on the right. And we affectionately call them the corn cob buildings here in Chicago. Marina City Complex was completed in 1968 to be a city within a city. Goldberg knew in the 50s and 60s everybody wanted to live in the suburbs. He thought if he could provide affordable housing with a lot of amenities, that would draw people back downtown. They have their own parking garages, marina, restaurant, bar, bowling alley. They used to have a movie theater, but that has since been turned into the House of Blues. I don't know if any of you guys are Steve McQueen fans. He was an action movie guy. His last movie, The Hunter, they filmed a car chase scene at Marina City where they drove a Grand Prix off the parking deck into the river. Kids, that was before computer-generated graphics. They physically had to do it. And then the city charged them $1,000 an hour till they got the car back out again. And if you remember back to last fall in November, Nick Walenda, one of the Flying Walenda trapeze guys, crossed the river from Marina City to the Leo Burdett building across the river November 2nd. I know it was the first week, I can't remember the date exactly, but yeah, that happened. These next two buildings on the right, we kind of lump them together and call it Riverfront Park. Both of them built in 1987, different architects. One of the black bay windows is currently the Westin Hotel, but was originally built by Helmuth Abada and Kasabam to be the Hotel Nikko for Japan Airlines. Even though it's not a Japanese-themed hotel anymore, they still maintain a very nice Japanese-style garden next door. Green glass building next door is a 35-story postmodern Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill installation. Currently, it is home to the American Bar Association, so if anybody's got a good lawyer joke, now would be the time for that. They're all right there for you, billing you for hours, even on Easter weekend. After this bridge on the right, we'll have a lovely red brick building known as the Reed Murdoch Center, built in 1913, designed by George C. Nimitz. This building used to be symmetrical, meaning the same shape on both sides. Not anymore. If you count from the clock tower to the right, there are 6 basic windows. To the left, there's only 5. A 20-foot section of this building was removed in 1926, simply to make way for the construction of the LaSalle Street Bridge ahead of us. They say the Reed Murdoch building is haunted. That's because, unfortunately, a huge maritime disaster happened across the river in 1915. The Eastland sank. They'd used that building as a temporary morgue. Morbid, but true. I've done work in there before. Lights come on and off at night when they shouldn't. Things move around. It's spooky over there at night. But on to happier things. We now have a fairly new office tower next door. I say fairly new. It was completed 6 years ago. Compared to something built in 1913, I think 6 years old is fairly new. But just to give you a sense of scale, this one is 785 feet tall, and it's known simply by its address, 300 North LaSalle. But I think the cool thing about this building is they tried to be as environmentally friendly as they could. One of the many features they use is they take water from the river, run it through coils, and use that to help air condition the building in the summer, so they don't have to use so much electricity. A lot of other buildings along the Chicago River employ that same method of cooling, and because of efforts like that, Chicago is now ranked number 6 in the United States as far as Energy Star rated buildings are concerned. So even though Mayor Daley is not in office anymore, he really did a lot of Chicago become more green. And that is going to bring us then to the gihugic, if not ginormous, Merchandise Mart. Merchandise Mart was built in 1930 by Graham Anderson Probst and White to consolidate all of Marshall Field's warehouses. Up until that point, Marshall Field and Company had 13 warehouses just scattered around town and thought, well, this is getting silly. Why don't we build one big building and put everything in there? This is the largest building in the world until they built the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. 4.2 million square feet of floor space. It sits on just over an acre of land. So big up until 6 years ago that one building had its own zip code, 60654. The giant heads you might have noticed in the front that face inward toward the building, David Letterman once referred to them as giant Pez dispensers. Obviously they're not, but can you imagine the size of the candy? That's what we like to call the Merchant Prince Hall of Fame. It busts famous retailers, people like Filene, Woolworth, Wanamaker, Montgomery Ward, and of course Marshall Field are represented up there. One last thing about the Merchandise Mart. It's a huge building, there's a lot to say, and I love good gossip. Merchandise Mart was constructed for a cost of $30 million. They had cash flow problems because of the Great Depression, so they sold it to the Kennedys. JFK's dad, Joseph Kennedy, purchased Merchandise Mart in 1945 for the bargain price of $12.5 million. Kennedys held on to it until 1998 when they sold it for $550 million. So they made a good return on their investment. Makes you almost wish you were here. Almost. So my new friends, we are going to head up the north branch of the Chicago River for a little bit. Yeah, this river's kind of confusing if you've never been here before. Chicago River is one big river. It has 3 separate branches. We just came off the main branch. We're going to head up the north branch for a little bit, turn around, go back down the south branch for a good long while, turn around and come back up the main branch. It's kind of like a big circle, yeah? Go up the north branch. I like to switch it up and talk about a couple things on the left-hand side just to bring up the monotony of it all and get that crick out of your neck for a minute. First building that will be on our left is essentially in front of us right now. It's the white building, has blue windows and a slight concave curved front. This is the Residences at River Bend, built in 2002 by James DeStefano. They have a parking garage inside of that very narrow building. It's a middle section that has opaque windows and no balconies. They use a freight elevator to get the cars up there. And rather than have central hallways with apartments on either side, their hallways are all on the west or the back side. Everybody that lives there gets this really great panoramic view of downtown. Funniest thing about this building. When it first opened up, they wanted to advertise. They bought themselves a huge banner. Banner literally covered the entire front of that parking garage. And in 3-foot tall letters, they spelled it wrong. Oh yeah. It said residences, not residences. Which I know was a tiny mistake, but I always thought it was hilarious because you know they spent a ton of money on the sign. Why didn't anybody spell check it? Now, well, big building next door, that would be the oldest building you'll see today on the river at least. It's built in 1898 by Frank Abbott and is called Fulton House. Originally it was used as a cold storage building. How they kept all of the dairy products inside cold before we had refrigeration. Check out their balconies. See how deeply they're set in? That's how thick the walls are, except that they're hollow. They filled the walls with frozen horsehair. That's what kept everything insulated. Harry Weiss was the architect in charge of turning those into condos. He'd have let that building thaw out for a year, so he could get the horsehair out of there and then put in the balconies and the windows. So Harry Weiss, good guy, great architect, loved sailing. That love of sailing is evidenced by his river cottages coming up next on the left. They're very nautical in theme. Slanted roof lines, formed triangles, remind me of sails on a sailboat. Portholes for some of their windows, and they have their own dock space at the bottom. 4 separate rooms, they're all joined together. They range in square footage from 2,200 to 4,200 square feet. And nope, I have no idea what they're worth real estate-wise. As far as I know, they've never been resold since their first purchase in 1990. So your guess is as good as mine. I get real estate questions all the time. People, I don't work for Baird & Warner. I don't have the time or the patience. It changes from day to day. I don't have that kind of time on my hands here. Anyway, so the people that live in the next residential area after this bridge on the left, they all got together and hired a bunch of lawyers because they decided they don't like being on the road anymore. So I'm no longer allowed to speak on the microphone between this bridge and the next bridge. Not a big ordeal because we turn around in between them. But we're going to have some forced fascist radio silence for a little bit. So take some pictures, enjoy the weather. I'll be right up here if you need me for anything. So thank you for your patience. Let's have time begins right now.
У нас так намазано.
I made some pieces, but I never really. No, there's a selfish like that. I just brought one cookie. No, there's a chocolate factory west of